Now that we can control our timeline, let's go ahead and explore what keyframes do. Now, you'll notice that I've twirled this open a few times and it says transform, opacity, and style. It has these little stopwatch icons next to it. What are all these? What's going on here? Well, let's go back to our snail layer. Now, originally, when we were doing the frame animation, I would just move the dot, add a new frame, move the dot, add a new frame. Very tedious, but eventually I got to where I needed to be and then I was done. With keyframes, you don't have to do that. A keyframe simply stores the information about a layer, such as where it's currently located via transform, how opaque it is, if it has any styles, that sort of thing. And then it sets those particular settings, those parameters, at that point in time. And then when it hits another keyframe, it will load in those parameters instead. So let me just demonstrate. Notice my snail is currently off screen. That means if I choose to make a loop, it will be as easy as having the snail be off screen again before it starts over. So let's start a little simply. I'm going to click the stopwatch icon here that says enable keyframe animation. Click. Now a couple of things have occurred. First, I have this new control. Go to previous keyframe, add or remove keyframe at playhead, go to next keyframe. Also, if I move my playhead a little bit over, we have this diamond. This yellow diamond is our keyframe. Let me just show you something pretty nifty. Go to the last frame and grab my snail. Notice that my the little flyout menu, it's popping up right over here, has essentially a left and a right in inches and an up and a down. That's the same stuff we've always done with our transformations, right? No big deal, except now they can be recorded. So now that I moved something, notice that we have a new diamond down here. And in fact, it's loaded in another diamond. Now I can go back to the first and last keyframe. So now if I move my playhead, it's actually put in information between the two locations as to where the snail is. So if I press play, the snail infinitely scrolls past us at an incredibly quick speed for a snail. But also somewhat boring, it's just going left to right. What if we want it to move a little bit more than that? Well, I can go to the center and I can add another keyframe. Notice that I've got this keyframe. And I can move the snail up. Now when I play it, from the beginning, we'll see that it goes up and then back down, while still moving left to right. Because I started with the motion left to right, this up and down has changed this so that it's on a trajectory of a slope. That's what the keyframe's doing. Now, if we were to move this keyframe over, say here, then instead of just going up and then back down, it will very quickly go up, and then it will take more time going down. Now, why did it move halfway across the screen before it got here? Well, that's because this keyframe, when I set it, contained the information of the snail's position, which at the time wasn't just that up motion, but also that the snail was halfway across the screen. So if I want the snail to move up, but I don't want it to move up and halfway across the screen, what I would need to do is this. I would have to delete the keyframe, go to where I wanted the snail to be in the up position, and then, since it will automatically add a new keyframe, simply drag it up. Now it won't jump halfway across the screen. It will instead go up and then slowly slope back down, because this keyframe contains the motion of the position of the snail again, which includes the fact that it was down. So it's important to keep in mind when adding keyframes that it's going to add in all kinds of information, such as where you are, not just left and right, but also up and down and all that sort of stuff. Because of this, you need to be a little cautious when you're placing keyframes around willy-nilly and make sure that you keep track of what they're doing. So we've got that ability, but we have more than just that. Let's say if I move this over, notice how long it takes it to reach there. Well, of course, because it's trying to maintain that position, and now it has to go very fast back downhill. So let's do something a little different. I'm going to slide this first keyframe, which all the information is the position of the snail right here. Notice that now the snail doesn't start moving until the halfway point, because that's where the keyframe is. So by moving that keyframe, I've prevented the snail from moving for a while. Now there's more. What if I wanted it to move a ways, stop for a while, and then keep going? Let's say I wanted it to stop here, just kind of come on screen and then stop. Well, I can add a new keyframe by clicking on this diamond, and that will cause the snail to move and stop, or in this case, not even stop, right? Because the next frame is just it having moved. So what I really need to do is duplicate this keyframe right here to another point in time. So if you right click on it, you have the ability to copy a keyframe. Now I can paste that keyframe, which is as easy as, oops, there we go. It's as easy as moving to where you need it to be and actually creating a new keyframe. So now you have another one, and then right clicking and pasting on that keyframe. Now, what it's going to do in this case is overwrite the data of this keyframe with the data we copied from that other keyframe. Boop. So now, during this period of time, these two keyframes are identical, so the snail doesn't move. So let's watch that. It comes over, does nothing, and then continues. Okay, so we're actually starting to get somewhere. And let's put that right back there. Now, there is another way to paste keyframes. Let me show you by first deleting this keyframe. I'm just going to click it and press delete. Now you can see the snail's free to move around. I'm going to go to, without making a keyframe, right-clicking and pasting, I'm going to go to the flyout menu, go to keyframes, and go paste. And voila, the keyframe has been pasted. What if I wanted the snail to move around a little differently? I could shift-click and slide these around. So now we'll see that it tries to get there faster. It has less distance to go, or less time to get that distance. Then it sits for a while, and then it should move a little more slowly back across. Let's watch that go. Voila. That's just from sliding the keyframes around. All right. Notice also that we have the option of doing hold interpolation rather than the standard linear. So this is if you want to do kind of strobing effects. I don't really want to do that in case any of you have light sensitivity. So what hold interpolation will allow you to do is that it will just skip from one to the other. Let's see if we can get that to work without having any weird behavioral issues. Let's hold interpolation again. See how it just jumps? I'm not going to play it. I don't want it to strobe, but it won't try to interpolate. So notice that this keyframe is essentially that diamond. Think of it also as a double arrow. From here to here, it's calculating where the snail needs to be. These squares means it just stops. The next square means that it needs to jump over to a new position. So if we switch this over, right-click to linear interpolation, it should still jump because of the square, but then afterwards it will move normally. All right, I'm going to set both of these back to linear so that they'll behave correctly. Delete that one. Here we go. So now these should still function without any difficulty. I forgot to reset this one. There we go. Without any difficulty, it should stop and then keep going. Now, what if we want our snail to do something while it's stopped? Like, for example, have its little eye stalks bob in and out a little bit. Well, in this case, we would need to do some adjustments to the snail itself. So if we're doing adjustments, we really need another layer, because if we have another layer, we can do whatever edits we want, transformations or what have you, and it will be able to do those calculations. So let's go ahead and use a trick we had from earlier. I'm going to set the, here we go. Well, we can either set the workspace and then we can go to our flyout menu and we could break it apart that way using our work area and then extract work area option. But as we saw, since it's not a group, it's not going to do quite as expected. So instead I'm going to do this. I'm going to, at my playhead, snip, and then at this playhead, snip. And now you'll notice that something a little different happens. We have our snail broken up into 3 layers. Now, if I move this layer down, notice that this changes to a video group. Now, a video group means that you can have multiple clips on one track. So this is really good for us. It means that we can start piling similar things together, which works really well. Notice it created a new group called a video group. If we were to just say duplicate the snail a couple of times, select both of the snails, and then go to the flyout menu and, we could do the flyout menu, or just press this new group. We have a standard group, which shows up as a standard group in the timeline, but the snails are still, kind of squashed together. Let me undo all of that. The video group means that instead of being stacked, on top of each other, it puts it all in the same line, which is really useful for us. So now we've got a video group, which will hold these snails together, and this new snail. Now, this new snail is essentially the same as the other snails. And what do I mean by that? They're all smart objects, which means they share a common location. So if I were to come into our snail here by double clicking, and if I were to set, say, a hue and saturation, and then set this to colorize and make this a green snail and save and close this, all of our snails will be green because they are not new smart objects via copy, which would increase the size of our working document noticeably as we went through. Notice we're only 11 megabytes despite having 3 snails. It is just a duplicate of the smart object via just dragging it to the new layer icon. So keep that in mind when you're doing slices and stuff. It's not doing a new smart object via copy. And if I were to right click on it and go new smart object via copy, which is in here somewhere, and I always lose track of it, new smart object via copy, if we come into this one and do a color rotation and save and close, we have now our green snails and our purple snails. So via copy is not a default when you're working with the timeline. So keep that in mind. Okay. But what does that mean? Well, when we've duplicated smart objects in the past, we can do certain kinds of edits without any difficulty. And one of those edits is Puppet Warp. So if we go to Edit Puppet Warp, it will add a Puppet Warp to our snail. So I can maybe increase the density so I've got some more points. I can't really see where I am, so I'm going to go to Window Navigator, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so that I can get really close in there. Let's add a point to this eye stalk and a point to this eye stalk. And I don't want to warp the whole snail, so I'll put a couple more points to stop it. Let's add maybe some more warp points, so maybe we can do some other things to it in a bit if we so choose. Okay, so we've got some points. Now, this is a smart object, so once this is done, it will still be editable. I'm going to squish in this eye stalk, squish in this eye stalk. Now watch what happens. Let's press Enter to accept those transformations and zoom out a little bit with Z for the magnifying key and then Alt to zoom out. Oops. Here we go. So now it goes and it brings in its little snail antenna and then it brings it back out. Now, let's say that this isn't all we want. Let's say that during this time, we want its little eye stalks to wiggle in and out. Well, what do we do for that? I'm going to cut at the current point twice, assuming I have it selected. There we go. The clip that you need cut needs to be selected when you cut at the playhead. Well, maybe it's jammed. That's fine. We'll start there. All right, I'm going to move this down. So now we have 2 of these, and I'm not satisfied. Oh, check this out, by the way. Let's squish all of these into one video group. A video group means that if you increase the size of one of them, it will move everything accordingly. If you shrink one, they'll still touch. So that is really useful in video groups. It means that you can do adjustments like this and things will slide around. All right, so let's pop this back out. And now I'm going to split this at the current location. So now I've got a couple of them. And notice how it immediately tried to resize, which is fine. So on this one though, I want all of our puppet warp effects to go back to normal. So this is Snail 4. So on Snail Copy 4, it might be good to name these. Let's go eyes in, eyes in, and we'll call this one eyes out. Okay, and now on the eyes out, double click the puppet warp and stretch the eye stalks out. Okay, press enter to accept it. And I'm just going to adjust the time a little bit so they're all a little bit closer. Here we go, in size. And we'll play it. There we have it. So now our snail goes, stops, does a little eye stalk wiggle, and continues about its merry way. Now, if we wanted this to be in even fewer groups, it's acceptable. Just highlight all of these with a shift click at the first clip, shift click at the last clip so that it will go through. You can also just click, shift click, and drag these down. And there we have it. Now notice there was a slight glitch right here. So what I'm going to do is just scrub my bar around a little bit. That will refresh the memory and fix the issue. Now there are 2 other times you can get glitches, bizarre glitches. And what you'll need to do is just turn off your eyeballs so the visibility is off and then back on. That will generally fix things. Occasionally, if you're working with masks and animating those separately, you will need to unlink your mask. And that will frequently occur if you're getting a flashing with a mask. All right, that said, I don't need this video group anymore. It's empty. And this video group might be called Snail. And so now we have our snail. So I'm going to save, but because again, you can easily corrupt everything forever, I'm going to save as, and we'll just increment that one. So now we have a snail. All right, let's see about having styles that change over time. We'll do that in the next video.